Okay, my name is Kate Butler. We're here at the Carlow Arts Festival. We're on the virtual campus of the festival, and thank you very much for anyone who's joining us. And thank you. Actually, I'd like to say a few thank yous before we get started. I'd like to thank the video director Carlos Austin and his camera operators Andrew Burr and Ryan Wright. I'd also like to thank Christina, who's here, who's been my tech support through all of this. I'd like to thank Joe Mangan, the director of the Carlow Arts Festival, and Emma Lucy O'Brien, the director of visual, who have put on the Woman in the Machine exhibition, which I recommend that you all get to have a look at either through the virtual platform here or in real world down at Visual in Carlow throughout the summer. The Carlow Arts Festival invited me to come and speak. It's my panel about music and technology. I said my name is Kate Butler and I'm a DJ and a writer, and I have a radio show on Dublin Digital Radio. It's a monthly radio show, and I have asked two musicians that I really admire to come and join me. The first is Gemma Dunleavy. She's from Dublin. She's a music maker and performer. 2018, she created a spoken word performance and video. It was called I Was Never Young, But I'm Not Yet Old, and it condemned oppressive and discriminatory government policies in the most beautiful, expressive way. And since then, she has been consistently doing this, articulating her own voice in her music. And her latest release is Up the Flats, which came out last year, and which has just hit 1 million streams on Spotify, and obviously on other platforms as well. But congratulations, Gemma, that is an outstanding achievement. We're all so proud.
And Gemma.
We're also joined by Honeychild. She's also from Dublin. She's a DJ and music maker. She set up Club Comfort with Ballyvock and DJ Selfie in 2017, and she was running a monthly club at home while also DJing internationally. This is obviously pre-COVID. And this year she established City Inc. Records, making a big splash with a compilation of dance floor bangers by herself and other Irish producers. So thank you both so much for coming and joining me. Really thrilled to have you because you're both such experienced music makers, particularly in the area of using technology for music, which I'm extremely interested in. So I think one of the things that might help listening and viewing this kind of get started in the discussion is the term producer. This is used so much around music making, but it has a lot of different meanings for different people. I was wondering, maybe Gemma, I would start with you. I mean, what do you understand the term producer to mean in the music context?
Well, I think the term producer has broadened loads in the last 10 years, say, even more than that. But I think, what I would have always considered a producer as was someone who was a studio producer who produced records for other artists in a studio, sometimes for themselves. But now I think when we hear the term producer, we tend to think more of someone who makes music electronically, or someone who makes the tracks or the soundscape of a song, I guess it's just now I'm learning to kind of navigate the word specifically to what I'm looking for or talking about or trying to explain. I still am attached to the term producer in relation to studio, and I kind of see what I hear people now explaining producer as. I see that as just a more modern musician or a musician making music in a modern way. I don't think it needs to be tied down to any one meaning, but that's just the way my brain processes it,
I think that's totally fair enough. And I think, you know, I think what you're saying is completely true, that the word producer is applied to a lot of different types of making music. And it might help us to be a little bit more clear on that. So perhaps, you know, we're going to talk about like a studio producer. That's what we mean, like somebody who is like going in and being a creative director, assisting their artists or band or whatever to record their music. That is a distinctive thing, as opposed to somebody who is, say, a producer artist, which we probably understand, as you say, comes up a lot in the electronic music world, because you have these people who they're basically using technology to record music. They're writing it, arranging it, and making it and recording it all at the same time, essentially. Be fair?
Yeah. And I think like it depends on what kind of a producer you're looking for. For example, if I'm looking for a studio producer, that can be quite confusing when you get people who have probably never worked in that area or in that capacity, who are people who make music on a computer or using you know, all the amazing softwares we have available to us now, and might get either paired with someone like that, or if you're just starting out and you're looking for a studio producer and you put it out online, you're probably going to get a lot of people who make beats and contacting you, and so I think it's important just to specify what you're looking for, what area you're working in, if that's what you do, you know.
Yeah, because it's a totally different, or it can be a totally different skill set. Rue, what do you think? What's your understanding of the term producer and it's applied in the music world?
Yeah, I think like similarly, I would say that it has quite a porous definition, and like it's the kind of thing that like I would agree definitely that like it very much depends on context, like genre, like from that. I guess like really there's even like music producers who are like almost a bit more akin to like a film producer, who like sort of are putting the whole almost like a project management role rather than like a studio engineer kind of vibe as well, which is like one other way it could be. I guess like yeah, it's kind of it's not very easy to like tie it down to any one single thing, but like yeah, similarly to what Gemma was saying, it's like you have to be kind of specific about what you're actually expecting in that particular context.
Yeah, maybe I think it might be useful to think about it in the historic terms. I think what you're saying there about being very similar to a film director, I sort of see the historic role of the producer as being like a creative director is somebody who's been given a big budget by a record company, and they have to manage that budget and make sure that the recording actually happens.
Yeah.
And that's
it's
very
like it kind
different
of maybe like comes out of the studio engineer kind of role. Like culturally, it's kind of taken on a lot of other meanings as it's like entered other spaces and stuff. Definitely today there is that kind of almost like studio producer versus kind of beat maker kind of dichotomy or whatever.
Yeah, because I guess years ago. Sorry.
Go on, Gemma. Yeah, go on.
If you're going back to say like time of when Jay Dilla was working on Donuts, for example, the people who what we would call producers now, like the people who are making the beats and who are sitting on Pro Tools and sitting on the MPC, you would call those beat makers, you know. Whereas now we call people who take that role, we call them music producers. And back then, a producer was a studio producer, like the creative director within the studio, within the session, and who also had a hand in engineering as well, you know. And so I guess the role has just changed, and I think the more available technology becomes to us, the term producer has gotten loose, you know.
Yeah.
Fast, not loose kids. sounds negative but no, I mean, yeah, it's just gotten more broad.
Yeah, I guess the more that things that people can do on their own, I guess the more difficult it is to pin down definition to one particular thing. Because I guess like with any sort of music making, everybody's going to do it in their own particular way, right? Always going to
Yeah.
be that element to it. Yeah. So just to move on then, since we've definitely covered that now, we've defined producer. I think one of the things I'd love to get from both of you, and I'll start with you again, is if you could perhaps tell your story, your journey around learning to use technology for music making, why you did that, what you did,
Mhm.
how you go about that.
Yeah, so I started using music on my guitar. I was kind of pairing my poetry with the kind of four chords at the time that I could play, and I was getting a bit tired by the sound. I was interested in making more atmospherical sounds, and I didn't really know. I had no idea how to get these sounds I wanted. But every time I went in the studio with a producer and recorded my acoustic guitar and my voice, I was always like, it's boring, I need something more. And he was saying, those pedals, you try this pedal, this puts a reverb on it, this is this. And then I heard that you could use reverb without the pedals through this program, to these, various software programs. And I guess I kind of dipped my toe into the world of plugins and everything else there, and it kind of expanded my songwriting into a whole other world, because I couldn't play the trumpet or I couldn't play the cello, but now I had all these MIDI instruments at hand, and just because I could play the keyboard, I could have a track with 70 instruments in a day, and it's just so exciting to me. Also, before I discovered that, I did a DJ and sound production course in Dublin, actually, and I learned to make beats in a program called Reason, software program called Reason, and that was actually my first introduction to any software. But I only knew how to make beats on it. I didn't understand the timeline window on it. I didn't understand how to have effects or anything like that. So I guess from there I just went into all the different software, Ableton, Logic, Reason, Pro Tools, Cubase, and just kind of found my way through it somehow, because I'm the most impatient person that you could come across. So moral of the story there is that if I could learn the software, anybody listening here can.
And I know that you pursued your studies further with music technology. Can you tell the audience what you did?
Yeah, so I studied. I did 1 year of sound technology in Liverpool, which was mostly studio engineering and live sound. So that first year was really full on. You were going out into Liverpool City by the last 2 months of the course and doing live sound in actual venues for actual gigs. And so it was really, really intense and full on, and I learned so much in that year, especially to do a production, because I was making all the mistakes in class under time pressure. Whereas if you're making all those mistakes and getting frustrated with software and you're at home, you can close the laptop and go out for a walk or a cycle, or maybe you might even decide, oh, here, I'm giving this up, this is wrecking my head, But when you have deadlines and stuff, you can't really decide to do that. So it really, really kept me going in times when I felt like I couldn't grasp certain aspects of even the mixing desks and stuff, because it was a lot to navigate within a year.
Yeah.
After that,
And go on.
I went and studied. I did another 3 years doing production and composition, and it was more so in a project based. So the first year I was working for other artists constantly, live sound for other artists, studio engineering for other artists. And then in the next 3 years it was all focused on my own solo project. So I was being my own producer in the studio. I was producing my own beats or beat making, if you want to call it that. So yeah, kind of got to work at it from both perspectives, which I thought was very helpful.
Massively so, I'd say, particularly the live experience, because from what I understand is very few women working in that area, like in producing live shows, being like the sound technician for a live show. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Or what's your
Yeah.
experience of that?
So I was the only woman on my course, especially for the first year, I was the only woman on my course, because it was more engineering studio focused, I guess. There's more men in the course, and there was 2 foundation courses, and the other course was I think it was performance, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was all more performance based. And all of the women went and did that course, and I ended up being the only woman in that one, and it was, I mean, I felt like I learned a lot, and I felt like, I don't know whether I had, I think when you're in an environment like that, for me anyway, when I'm in an environment like that, I feel, it makes me feel a little bit more privileged in a sense, because it gives me more of a fire in my belly to do good at it, you know. And yeah, it was really, I really enjoyed it, you know.
In terms of that experience, how do you find? I mean, you studied it really quite intensively using technology to make music, and like, do you feel confident in it now?
No, I feel like every day I'm learning. I feel like every day I'm making the same mistakes over and over. So, in the times when I'm sitting down on my software for 3 weeks in a row, and I'm doing that every day, by the end of week 1, I'm back in a flow, and I know it like the back of my hand. For example, I'm really busy at the minute, and I'm working on my projects in other areas. So I'm working on release stuff, and more the admin and the stuff, and rehearsals. I haven't really been in my software for the last 2.5 weeks, I think. I will open it, and I'll probably spend the first 2 days being frustrated at making the same mistakes and having to, do the YouTube tutorials to find out how to do one thing that I've probably done a million times before. But it's kind of like you have to be keeping it up and have to be practicing it to be, for me anyway, to be in it, to be fully fluent. But once you pick it back up, I find you fall back into it really easily. But I feel like I haven't explored even half of the possibilities of the even just the opportunities within my software, I find that exciting. I find it exciting, and I find it a little bit I don't know what the word is, but it makes me a little bit anxious or something, because I'm the type of person that I work better with limitations. So sometimes having the vast array of the instrument options just to throw up a demo to send over to another musician for a rehearsal, I'll probably spend the whole day sifting through those instruments, when I probably should have just picked the piano anyway, because it's only a demo and I'm gonna put harp in its place or something. So but that's the beauty of it, because you have endless amount of surprises waiting for you when you want to delve in. And I think for that reason you'll never get bored. You might get overwhelmed, but you'll never get bored.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so interesting, because I think overwhelming is something that a lot of people experience.
I started off being like a DJ before I started trying to do like production or beat making of any sense. That was kind of like the first, like, actually like learned music as a child and stuff like that, and I played the trumpet for years and stuff, so I had like some musical education. But and I think when I was about 18, my friends started to like DJ and stuff, so basically I just like learned from them, mostly from Jack Black Block. But then yeah, I guess like in the kind of 2 years after that, just kind of to give a go of like machines because it seemed fun and listen to loads of dance music and stuff. So it seemed like a obviously interesting thing to do. So I got like my brother like cracked Ableton for me, and basically like still use cracked Ableton. Tell them that though, and like I guess it's kind of like it's been really slow to be honest. I've been probably using Ableton now for like three-ish years. When he started using it, like I've been using it like really regularly. I feel like before that it was like always a very like it's coming off the beach kind of thing where I would like a bit of energy with it for a while and then get really frustrated and not touch it for months and then kind of come back to it. Yeah, I guess like still feel like I'm very much in the process of learning as well. Like I still feel like I'm really, really early in my development and that kind of thing. And I have a lot more to learn. I'd really like to do some like actual like formal education with it at some point. Definitely would be like really great. And yeah, I feel like me like looking to deadlines and like stuff like that is like not something I'm too. And yeah, I recently made a pretty big step there in the last couple of months because I previously been making all the music I made on like really really laptop that I'd had for years that was just like it's kind of the screen was all cracked and like you'd like lose the audio all the time because like the aux cord and the aux port and the USB slots were all like fried, so it just like was not a good setup for actually trying to like get creative and like have fun making music on. But so a couple of months ago I decided to like build a computer, which has been really cool because now I have like quite good just like I still don't really know how to use that much of it, but like I have at least I know that like I have tool that now for the next couple of years or whatever will last me and be good. Yeah. Yeah, I guess
I
that's
find
kind of.
it's really interesting that you've done that because I mean one of the things I'd love to talk to you both about, and we may as well chat a little bit about it now, is like access to technology and the I mean everybody talks about oh well it's so much cheaper now and you can make music with software so you don't even need synthesizers anymore, you don't need drum machines, they were also expensive and you don't need that. At the same time, it's still not cheap to do it, right? I mean, as you said, you have to build your own computer in order to have something powerful enough and like good enough to be able to do this properly. And I like, is it fair to say that you built it so that it would be cheaper to do that than actually buy a powerful computer?
Yeah, definitely. That was the calculus. Absolutely, was that like you could pay a bunch of money for a nice Mac or like some kind of creative computer that's good for doing creative kinds of things, but it would be like really expensive. Definitely in terms of my budget and like this way, I think I spent like a little over $1,000 in total on the computer, which is obviously like a big investment. Definitely the most expensive thing I bought in like years. But kind of was looking at it as a thing of like, don't mind sinking some investment into this because like, as I say, it's gonna like hopefully last me for years. And I kind of felt like if I go the route of building it myself, it'll be cheaper. And also maybe then I'll understand, say, if I want to like, if like something breaks and I need to like replace a part or something like that, it's just much handier to be able to do that yourself, because like I
Mhm.
guess obviously going to be using computers for the rest of my life, and like could be spending money paying like computer repair people do things, or I could just do it for myself.
Mhm.
It seemed like a good long-term kind of like strategic, you know, set of
It's
skills
very
to acquire.
yeah, it's great. It encourages self-reliance, right?
That's what I'm all about with this stuff, definitely. Insofar as I can, I feel like I'm still only finding my feet with that, but
Yeah, well, I mean, you're taking the important step. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about, something that you mentioned when on your journey, you were saying that you learned some pieces from Jack Ballybach and other friends. And that's something I think it's quite interesting that both of you have sort of different paths. Like Gemma had a quite a formal education, and you, Rue, had an informal education. And I think that informality around learning how to use technology in music making is something we're really familiar with in the dance music world, because it seemed like there wasn't a huge amount of formal education at the, certainly in the 1980s and thereabouts. What I was just
Mhm.
wondering was your experience of that informal learning, like how that works and how important that is to kind of the community and networks of creativity.
I think like I think it's really important in the community, and like yeah, that's kind of work sense, because like it's one of the ways that like people kind of interface with each other and like build artistic relationships. Like one way is definitely through this kind of like formal people educating each other kind of approach. Like yeah, I suppose like I feel like yeah, I think with the DJing thing it was um like very much a thing where like me and a bunch of my friends from school, this was like when we left school, but we were still hanging out. It's kind of like our first year of college, and I think I hated college, and we didn't really have any other friends. So like just like go over to Jack's house and like set up the decks and like have a few drinks and like smoke a bit and like all basically just go back to back on the decks, and that was kind of like how I learned to do that. Um, More or less entirely just from like doing it in that very informal kind of context.
Mm-hmm.
Which obviously then like for me went on to then kind of become a really huge part of my life. So like it was really cool. I'd say with production, like definitely like had similar experiences. People, yeah, Kean, DJ Selkie, who we also do Club Comfort with, I've done some like really, really important and very educational studio time with him, which has been great. I've also learned a good bit off my brother as well. My big brother also is like Ableton and was kind of like making beats and tunes and stuff. So he would have shown me a lot of things at the start, and he kind of like set up Ableton for me, and helped me crack it and stuff. So definitely like I feel like it's really important in sort of how like there's kind of like I think bring gender and stuff into it. That's like one of the like perhaps one of the reasons why as well it's like hard for like it that's perhaps one of the mechanisms where exclusion kind of happens sort of probably quite subconsciously a lot of the time, because it's uh like for at the time I feel like kind of this there's kind of this taking people into your wing kind of thing, and like people don't sort of actively make an effort to like include like women or include just even people that they wouldn't know as much or whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
and it just ends up being that like you show your friends, and like your friends are more often than not kind of people who are to be similar to you or whatever. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of maybe one of the dynamics of like how a lot of that kind of happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I totally agree.
I
And
think
Gemma, what's your experience of that?
I think the informal training is actually the most important. Like, you know, I'm happy for my education and I'm very grateful for it. I think the biggest gift it gave me was the networking. You know, the people that I met in college. Uh, you know, my mix and mastering engineer is someone that I met in college. My most of my collaborators are people that I met in college. But in terms of like for anybody that's sitting thinking, oh, I wish I went to college because I'd be so much better at production. I wish I had a bit of training because I feel like I wouldn't run into these obstacles that I do when I'm working in Logic or Pro Tools or Ableton. That's not really the case at all. So like most of my learning that I did within those softwares was at home, was nothing to do with college. You know, college was good for me because it gave me the deadlines and it, you know, kind of lit a fire under me. But in terms of like all of the stuff that I know that makes my music sound the way it does, all of that was done outside of college. So I think, you know, anybody that feels like they should go to college to become better at any of those specific things, you don't need to spend college fees on that and to become better at that craft. I mean, there's so many options available to us now. One that I think is always worth mentioning is a site called Coursera, Courseura, and it's you can do a free Ableton course, and I think it's a 4 week or an 8 week course, and it is really good because it sets you certain deadlines. So first week you learn to record audio, second week you learn to do MIDI. I can't remember the exact, you know, tasks for each week, but you have to hand in stuff each week, and you have a peer group and you can share stuff with them. So it kind of gives you that sense of, oh, I have a deadline this week. And during making those deadlines, you learn how to use you learn how to mix, you learn how to compress, you learn how to do certain things in that if you're like me and you get frustrated easily with technology, you probably would have got up and walked away. But because you have that little deadline on Friday, you're going to just spend that extra hour and get it done, you know, and then you're going to use that in your own music making. So I think stuff like that is really beneficial, and you don't need to, you know, you don't need to make yourself feel like you have to study production for 3 years to do it.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah, check that out. That sounds
brilliant.
good.
Yeah, it's really,
I
really
should,
interesting.
I should do the same.
And they do loads of there's piano lessons, there's an online what's it called, music theory with Berkeley College. There's like piano lessons, there's all of these different things, and you can pay like I think if you to get the cert, so you have a certificate in it. Like I wasn't too bothered about the certificate, I just wanted to learn those skills and have some type of structure on me for it. So it's definitely amazing. There's loads of different courses on it.
Well, I mean, you're clearly like a really driven person. Like, I mean, listening to you discuss all of the things that you've done over the years, I'm so in awe because I would never get off my ass to do half of this. What I'm wondering though is, like, how important are those personal experiences, the ones that Rue was talking about in terms of, you know, like having the opportunity to share creative experiences that combine creativity with learning, if you like, with your peers. Have you had many of those experiences?
That's the only stuff that has ever stayed in my head and is with me today. It's the stuff that I learn in those environments. It's like you know, when you're teaching a child a language and you go through all the verbs and you sit down and you do it really methodically. You know, none of that really sets in. You're kind of forcing your brain to remember a rhyme of this language that you, when you actually try to use it within the context of speaking to someone, even though you know it, you can't really put it together. When you learn in social situations or in real life interactions, that's the stuff that actually I think sits into your muscle memory. And for me, when I look at any of the skill I know, for example, I studied music theory. I did it because I wanted to get in college, and I never did music in school or anything. So, you know, when I was 19, I still didn't know how to make a major chord minor. I didn't know any of these things. And I went and just drilled grade 8 music into me so I could apply for this course that I really wanted to go to because that was a requirement. And I passed it with flying colours. Don't ask me how. I knew it all, like in terms of black and white, ticking a box, putting it on paper. I knew it all. When I went to actually learn piano, that my piano teacher was like, how have you passed grade 8 and you don't know anything in terms of, can't apply that to the piano? And I had to relearn all that. And it's only now I sit there and I'm like, oh, that thing that I played is modulating. That's that thing that my teacher always used to go on about that I used to roll my eyes at, you know. So it's only now that I'm applying what I learned in theory to what I'm actually physically playing. That's so important, those environments. And like what Rue was saying there about like learning with Jack, like when she was first starting out, and those are the moments when you're pure joy. It's euphoria getting to kind of navigate this new skill with your pals around you, spurring you on.
Was it?
No
I
better
literally
feeling.
like I really strongly remember the moment where I like hit like a beat match blend for the first time, and I remember like the look on Jack's face of like kind of being
Yeah.
impressed with me, and I feel like that was kind of like, for me, was like the thing that kind of solidified it as like, oh, I actually really like this. This is something I want to do.
Yeah. It's funny, I'm getting goosebumps listening to you saying that, because those moments are just, you know, they're you can't buy them. And I'd encourage anyone, if you want to get into DJing, or if you want to get into producing, or if you want to get into playing music, find a circle of people around you and just reach out to them, because you'll learn more from that. Any kind of degree will give you, if you want the degree because you genuinely really want to build your skill set and learn in that way, and build your qualifications, great. But if you want to, I think you need to find communities or pockets of what's going on in that interest that you have and involve yourself in it. And if there isn't any around you, you know, build it yourself. You know, anybody else that you think might be interested in, hey, do you want to come over and like, do you want to come over and watch me do a mix? Like, you can, I'll show you how to mix, I'll show you how to use the decks, and if you like it, you can do more of it. You know, just building communities around you like that. I mean, all you have to do is look at what like Rue and Jack and Keane did with Club Comfort, and you know, it's the most joyous environment that you'll ever be in, and it's so warm and like, lovely to watch. You know, it's so endearing. And then behind it is pure skill and talent that didn't come out of that elitist nature of like, I'm gonna have to go home and, you know, really practice that before I go there and show it to them. I feel like I could walk up to them at any show there and be like, here, can I like from you? You know.
You obviously can. Thank you, Gemma. Very, very kind words.
I'm coming too. Okay, don't leave me out. And I think like, and on that, and that's, I want to go back a little bit to accessibility, because it was something that we spoke about earlier. But you know, what we're talking about here is something about community building. It's about inclusiveness, and I think the worlds that we inhabit are very conducive to that. Like we're all involved with Dublin Digital Radio in some form or another, and the wider alternative music scene in Ireland, and I do find them very much to be that, like inclusive and community building. But I suppose there are still barriers for a lot of people, and I'm thinking in particular about people with disabilities in the world of music making. And I don't know if either of you have any views about that. And I suppose one of the things to mention, something that we know about and maybe not all of our viewers know about, is that there are a group of DJs in Galway, and they play at a club called Bounce, and a lot of those DJs have intellectual disabilities. They have learned how to DJ together as a group, as a community of friends, as peers. And I suppose what they've done is exactly what we're talking about, is that they've doing something that they're really interested in, and they're learning to do it together, and then they're performing together, which is pretty much what we're talking about, isn't it?
It's so deadly. I think bounce is so cool. Like really like yeah, just really cool. It's like thinking about this when I was thinking about this question or whatever, that like it's kind of almost ironic that like music production software is like so intensely visual. Like you kind of have to do everything through all these really like finicky visual kind of. Obviously, to an extent, you can make it more tactile by using MIDI controllers and doing different kinds of things like that. But like the face of it, like definitely like technology assumes that you say you aren't visually impaired. It assumes that you aren't like assumes that you have the kind of I suppose like a manual mobile function to use all the things. So I think there's very real barriers in place for people who like are not the kind of person that is they assumed to be by the software.
Yeah.
Like in my own experience, I have like a bit of a bad back basically and bad knees, and I'm a bit like slightly physically disabled in that sense, and I find that like quite a big barrier for DJing. Not so much music production, but for DJing definitely, because like it's a very standy thing. Stand for a long time, and standing for a long time, unfortunately, is something that I'm like less and less able to do all the time. And like, yeah, definitely like kind of a bit frustrating or whatever. That like the thing that you love to do and you would do for just all night if you could, like, kind of. There's just that like really material barrier through like I nothing else fills me with more joy than like being for a big crowd of people for all night. But at the same time, if that's gonna leave me really pain for the next few days, and like if I'm not gonna be able to go to work on Monday or like whatever, it's like definitely a big thing for me. I suppose like yeah, I think that like all these things like yeah, it's definitely like a really big issue in terms of access, and something that I feel like doesn't get talked about like a huge amount or kind of discussed or like parsed out. I definitely don't feel like I've really encountered pretty much anyone who I've talked to about having the same kinds of issues with DJing. And then yeah, obviously like there's some really cool things like bounce and stuff. But I feel like it's not something that really gets forefronted in the conversation around these things at the time.
Yeah. Thank you for talking to us about that, Ruth. I really appreciate it, and I think like what we're dealing with is precisely what you're saying about the technology. Is the technology assumes that everybody is able-bodied or doesn't have an impairment of some kind, and the same thing with how our world is built. So, like all DJ gigs are assume that you're going to stand, right? I mean, I've never seen a desk set up at seating level.
I've done it before, but to be honest, it's like actually quite hard to DJ like sitting. It doesn't really work. Like I've tried to figure this one out for ages, because like not least just because like say when I started DJing when I was 18, I only just really started to realize I was disabled around that age, and at that point I was still able to like basically stand in my room for 3-4 hours and like bash out tunes and like really enjoy that. It's like a totally fulfilling activity. It's like now at this point, and I'm 24 now, so it's a couple of years on, but like not that much longer. I really can't do that. I can't really like stand and just like play tunes for myself for a very long time, which is frustrating because like I definitely don't practice as much as I used to, because like it's just not as fun because there's like the pain element. But I think I've tried to work this out for ages. What's a good workaround? It's definitely helpful to have like a chair so that you can like sit down for a minute when you're playing a long song or something. It's actually really hard to like mix tunes basically. I find it anyway, if I can't sort of almost be like basically dancing a little bit on my feet, I can't really like keep the time properly.
That's
So
interesting.
I
Wow.
definitely find that a challenge. I think it's like it's changed the way I DJ in a weird way as well, because I when I started DJing I was like extremely hyperactive, and I would only play like 30 seconds of every song, and I would like be constantly cutting back and forth between things and like doing it in this much more energetic way, which like I kind of miss, because that was sort of like I felt like that was kind of my style, and I kind of liked that. I feel like I'm much more inclined to play much longer tunes now and to leave them playing for much longer, simply because it's like I can sit down for 3 minutes in the middle of the tune. That's like big, you know, a big help. I remember literally at a gig that me and my partner Aoife ran at the Sound House there in 2019, like getting really tired, and like we were doing back to back, so we were like going, you know, taking turns or whatever. Basically every time Aoife would play, I would just like have a little lie down behind the DJ booth and kind of like
Yeah.
look at the screen for a while and kind of yeah, it's definitely like a frustrating one. Yeah.
There's a lot of barriers there for sure. And I'm frustrated that you're frustrated. I wish we could come up with a solution. Maybe we will at some stage. But Gemma, do you have any view on this particular subject?
Yeah, I think like it's, you know, hearing I've seen Rue DJ where that, you know, I can't remember what gig it was, Rue, we were both at, you know, and you were, you know, struggling with standing doing such a long set. I can't remember when it was, but you were playing for quite a while, and does just make you think that, you know, like like you say, that form of like DJing, for example, just assumes that everyone is able-bodied, you know. Um, I also just feel like music in general, and especially club-orientated music, still quite elitist in a way, or is exclusive, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when I was first making music and performing in the club scene, it definitely felt very like there was a one type of person, like a stereotype, and everybody was trying to fit to that stereotype, you know. Um, and if it did feel very exclusive, um, I remember thinking at times, you know, if I wasn't just, you know, the kind of person, if I'm about to feel in any way intimidated or anything, I just kind of throw myself out there more just to, you know, rip the plaster off, like, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking if I was the other way, if I was the kind of person that as soon as I felt a bit intimidated, I closed off or ran away, I probably wouldn't have stayed in that scene or industry very long, you know. And I do still think there's a way to go. We still have. That's why I love Club Comfort so much, and why I loved like a lot of, you know, the DDR nights and Jigsaw, for example. And there's, you know, there's just it completely flipped that idea and that narrative on its head. Um, when I was first going out on the club scene in Dublin, it was completely different. It was very exclusive, you know.
Very
Yeah,
similar
and
experience of like when I
yeah.
started kind of like first started DJing, like it was like this really like macho environment. Everything was like really
Yeah,
I don't know, very intense macho kind of vibes. I remember the first few gigs I ever did in the Grand Social, and there was just this like distinctly kind of macho, competitive, agonistic kind of vibe of everyone who was there. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I wouldn't really have been like if it weren't for Jack and Kian and like Q and Paddy and people like that, and then like especially finding Jigsaw and finding the DDR community and like how different that was. Like I don't know if I really would have stayed in it because it was just like not really my vibe, you know. I guess that's kind of contributed a lot to like us totally doing our own thing because we were kind of like this isn't really what it's about, is it? So, you know,
yeah,
so, yeah, I know what you mean. A couple of years ago in Dublin was actually weirdly very different. Yeah.
yeah. Such a short space of time. I feel like it's improved so much in that area. I do still feel like there's a way to go, just because most of,
Definitely.
I don't know, I guess like my circles feel really warm and friendly because I tend, like, you know, I'm lucky to know some really sound people who are doing the things that I love and I'm interested in. But I do know that, you know, I only found those circles quite recently in life, and I feel like I did an awful lot of, like, you know, stiff upper lip at the beginning when there was a lot of things I probably didn't feel comfortable in or didn't feel welcome in, but I stayed there anyway because I wasn't going anywhere, you know.
Well, I'm glad you did, and you know, I think that's like often the experience like us is we find that we are like a minority in these situations. That was definitely my experience in the late 90s and the early noughties, when there were, you know, I mean, I can count the amount of male DJs on one hand that I knew at that time, and one woman making dance music that was more a boil at that time. So it has definitely improved considerably, but I guess going to have to wrap up pretty soon. So I suppose um, on that thread of you know that things definitely have improved, that you know people are certainly talking about how to make creative communities within music much more inclusive and to make them more friendlier to who might find it difficult to find a way in. Um, what, how do you think we can work better at that as a, you know, as a society? What kind of infrastructural supports do we need to put in place for those people who might find it difficult still to navigate um, learning learning how to use technology, whether that's an informal or formal way? Do you want to start with that?
I think like no, like I suppose it's hard to say, but I think like just like uh, trying to like I suppose trying to engage with like young people and like maybe like I feel like for me like when I look at Ireland like one of the cooler things I see like uh, I've always thought it was really cool how many like really interesting uh, acts in the last like 10 years have come out of that like networking of music education called like music generation and stuff like that. And I've always thought it's like really interesting that like I don't I've never or anything, I don't know, but thought it would be like really interesting to like I guess like youth club structures and like things like that where you're like trying to like make it like just like directly make the equipment directly accessible to some people would be like a really good idea, or like even including it as like a something potentially that like you know, young children or like teenagers could do in school at certain points, things like that. I guess like it's like institutionalizing things, even though like I totally agree, definitely, like what Gemma was saying about that, like the stuff that maybe you do outside of institutions is like where a lot of the really like lasting education actually comes from. Like, at the same time, I feel like you perhaps do need some kind of institutional framework. Not necessarily that everyone goes to music college, but like maybe some more broader, more accessible music framework that like introduces people to it through, say, the public school system or something like that. Really great if you could do that, because I think like a lot of it is just the fact that like um if you don't ever come across a situation in which someone lets you mess around on music making equipment or some decks or something for a while, you're just not really gonna like necessarily like hard to come to that otherwise. Like I feel like people see people playing guitar, they see people singing, so they kind of like it's the obvious. Not that that's obvious in a bad way, but that's like it's a lot easier to imagine yourself doing that or like imagine yourself wanting to do that. Whereas like if you never really encounter the technology and encounter it in kind of like comfortable free space where you're able to like make some mistakes and mess around and like build your confidence naturally, like you're just not really going to. So I don't know, I guess that would be my kind of like
I
suggestion.
think that's yeah, I'm totally down with this, and actually I'll just say really quickly that Christina Bjork piloted a scheme a little bit like that in schools in Iceland and Scandinavia a few years ago. It was part of her biophilia album, and she managed to get the Icelandic government to fund basically a pilot project where they brought technology to schools, not just in relation to music, but basically, yeah, using technology for creative purposes in schools. I am totally down with that. And Gemma, what do you think? What kind of infrastructural changes would you like?
I think definitely for it to be introduced in schools. Though I would also be very like concerned about in what way they would teach it. Because let's say, for example, I didn't study music in school because the environment that it would have been taught in wouldn't have been good for me, and the way that it would have been taught wouldn't be good for me. So my approach, if I was able to actually, there's a place down here, the Five Lamps Arts Festival, and just before COVID, they they brought me in to do like community classes with the kids. So I was doing like free classes for the kids in their musicianship classes. So the kids would come and they would we'd kind of sit in a circle and talk about our musical interests, and we would, so most of them were just interested in songwriting or being like Ariana Grande, or but some of them had a real interest in not singing, but they wanted to write the words of the song. And we would kind of off in little groups, and whoever wanted to write the words, they would do that. And then on actually the very last week, I brought in my laptop because I saw one of them had a bit of a flair for the beat and the stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna get her to make up a beat and able to. Environments like that, community environments, I think would be amazing, especially in more working class communities where you do tend to have children with a higher level of intellectual disabilities, or behavioral issues and stuff like that. Environments where they probably wouldn't get a chance to ask themselves, what is my hobby, or what would I like to do? Because I found within doing those classes in the Five Lamps Arts Festival, there was kids that probably didn't even realize that was an interest for them until it was offered to them, and they ended up being really, really good at it. And even to my surprise, because I would have never known that those kids had an interest in that or were good at it. So I think in environments like that, where it's nearly an alternative to their current environment, which we now have an awful lot to offer, I think offering technology in that way would be good. And one other thing, just as I was listening to Rue there, I'm thinking also, I think a lot of it might lie in like hands of us as well. Not lie in the hands of us, but we could probably do a lot more than we think. Because I'm just thinking now, when I was getting frustrated on my guitar, going, this just sounds like a guitar, and I wanted to sound like something deadly, and I was getting real frustrated, and I'm trying to learn software and stuff like that. I was looking at the different artists that I was into at the time. I just felt like they were like a million miles away, and they were like, these geniuses that, like, how are they even born? Like, they just had software. And about 4 years later, I realized that they weren't like the be all and end all because they made this interesting sound. Their art was amazing and their story was interesting and unique to them. But the skill that they had, something that I actually could really easily learn. And I think stuff like, maybe, maybe it wouldn't be any harm for me to like share on my platform that Ableton course if I can go on and find it, because there's probably some kid out there that's like, oh, I'd love to make music like that, but I wouldn't know where to start.
Definitely.
I love this. Yeah, I love all of these proposals, and particularly that last one, Gemma, because I think visibility is so important to all of this. And where we started tonight was talking about producers, and producers so invisible, and so it's just has become is this really mysterious thing for so many people because of that invisibility. And I would love to see more transparency around music making process.
The process as well, yeah.
Absolutely.
Full ideas. Thank you, both of you. And listen, thank you both for speaking so wonderfully and interestingly. I learned so much tonight, and I always love speaking to you both.
Well,
Anything
thanks for having
you
us.
want to ask? Oh, stop the light. Would anyone like to ask a question? Shall we just wrap up then?
Do we have a question here?
Doesn't look like it. Okay. Guess we'll just wrap up. So, Christina, I don't know if Christina's around. She wants us to go on anywhere or just leave it at that. Okay, I think we'll probably say goodnight.
Yeah.
I just want to thank again the Carlow Arts Festival and the Visual for hosting us and giving us a chance to talk about this stuff, because it's obviously something that means a lot to and Rue and myself, and it's just really nice to be able to talk about it and share it all with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Alice, do you want to finish recording?